Hello, everyone, and welcome to the gathering. It's good to have you in worship with us today. My name is Matt. If we've not met, I'm the lead pastor here at the church, and I want you to think about something with me. I think that giving is central to what it means to follow Jesus. And some of you, I think, agree with that. Some of you I know do. Maybe a lot of you are skeptical about that, but I think it's true that giving is central to what it means to follow Jesus. In fact, if you would just look at the life of Jesus, giving is all over the life of Jesus. I mean, think about it from the very beginning. Think of Christmas. We just came out of the Christmas season. The incarnation, this act of Jesus coming down from heaven to dwell with us here on earth. The Bible describes it this way. This is in Philippians. It says that though he, that's Jesus, was in the form of God, he did not consider being equal with God something to exploit, but he emptied himself. He gave everything he had up so that he could come to be with us. Right at the center of Christmas is giving. You know, during Jesus' life and his ministry, he gave up so much so that he could teach and preach and minister to people. In fact, he once famously said this in Matthew. He said, "Foxes have dens and birds in the sky have nests, but the human one, or the Son of Man, has no place to lay his head." The idea being, of course, that he gave up. He had to give up shelter and comfort and community and even the idea of a home so that he could fulfill his mission for us. You know, to explain why he did this over and over again as a rabbi, because people didn't expect a rabbi to give, he once taught his disciples this. He said, "Whoever wants to be first among you will be your slave or your servant, just as the human one, or the Son of Man, didn't come to be served, but rather to serve and to give his life to liberate many people." There's that word again, to give. And of course, Jesus fulfilled that on the cross, even giving his very life so that we might have a new life. But from the very beginning of his birth to the very end in his death, underneath it all was this idea of giving, the story of the impact that Jesus makes on us. You know, the way that Jesus changes our life, it starts with giving. Giving is at the heart of what Jesus does for us. And his giving changes us. And I want to press that point because then it shouldn't be a surprise when we say this next thing, that if we want to follow Jesus, if we want to be like Jesus, if we want to worship Jesus, then we also must learn to give, that giving has to be central to our lives as well. You know, just as Jesus gives to us and it changes us, we're called by Jesus to give ourselves for the sake of other people so that God can make an impact on others through us. That's the lifestyle that a disciple of Christ is called to. And what that means is that giving is right there at the center. It's a linchpin of what it means to follow Jesus. Now, today we're ending this series, Greater Things. And a lot of you know this by now, that a year ago I started this sermon series. It was really more than a series. It was a 2-year generosity initiative in which I shared a vision of what I thought God wanted from our church, that as great as it had been, that God had greater things in store for us. And we've been celebrating in this series kind of each of the components of that vision. So I started a couple weeks ago with the idea of greater reach. That was the first part of our vision, that we believe that God wants us to be the kind of church that makes new space for new people so that we can invite others to experience Jesus. Last week, I talked about greater depth, the idea that we want to create a community where people can grow in their relationship with Christ, because as we grow, we think our capacity to be used by God also is extended. And today, I want to end with this idea of greater impact, that all of this leads to the idea that God wants to use us, not just to change our own lives, not just to kind of huddle together and grow here in the church, but ultimately he wants to turn us around so that we can make a difference, an impact in our families, in our workplace, in our neighborhoods, on our block, in the city that we live in, and even in the world. But I think that this part of the vision is maybe the easiest for a lot of us to resonate. I mean, I think most of us look around and we say, yeah, Matt, I want to do something meaningful. I want to help other people. I want to change the lives of others. I want to be part of something bigger than myself. I mean, of course the church should want to serve and to change the world. But what I want you to think about is, how do we get there? I mean, why do we do that? Well, we do it because God first changed us. God first gave to us, and so we respond by now giving ourselves to others. But what that means is that word giving, generosity, that practice, giving, is not some side item. It's not some fringe Christian thing. It's not an extracurricular activity for Christians. But rather, giving is actually foundational to the radical life that Jesus calls us to. I mean, Christians are called to be generous, to give because Jesus first gave. And here's the thing, the more you and I get giving right, the more we can get generosity right on an individual level, the more that God can use us and use our church to make a big impact on the world level. And this is why, Jesus talks about things like money and possessions and giving more than almost any other topic in the Bible. It's because our stuff, our money, our desire to see things as ours can really get in the way of our ability to make an impact on the world. Generosity is at the root of the impact that we can have on behalf of Christ. And so as I look back on that series that we did a year ago, it was so important. I said at the time that it was the most important series that we were going to do. And the reason why is because everything we've been able to do since then started with acts of giving, with acts of generosity. I want you to think about something with me. When I think about greater impact, the kind of difference our church has made in our city and in the world, I just think about the incredible things that have happened just in the past year. Like, just take the past 12 months, and I want you to think about this. I just received word last week that 8 new wells had just been completed in Mozambique. I even have a few pictures for you. Here's the cool thing. When I get this news, I also get the name of every village where that well is dug. We know the leaders and the people whose lives are impacted. I get a number of people that live within range of that well. By the way, those 8 wells have impacted the lives of over 20,000 people. I mean, it is absolutely incredible to just think about that. I mean, that is life-changing work. Just in 6 weeks, we've already completed 8 wells in 2018. But I want you to think about this. Where did that start? Well, it started on Christmas Eve, when each of you decided to change the way that you live. You decided not to hold on to what you have for yourself, but you decided to give. The impact we were able to make through clean water started with an act of giving. Or think about this. Lent is coming up. And, during Lent, we'll talk a lot about our literacy project. And many of you know literacy project. We have 100 mentors that go into schools, 2 of them, one in Normandy, one in the city of St. Louis, to work with kindergartners and first graders, teaching them how to read. We are already seeing a tremendous impact there, that kids who go through this program are growing at their reading at a rate that we don't see in other kids who aren't in the program. It's making a difference. And just this past week, I received a testimony of sorts from a woman. This woman actually doesn't even go to the gathering, but she's a judge in the juvenile court system here in St. Louis. And she heard about our literacy project in a neighborhood meeting. And she thought about it. She learned a little bit more. But in October, she finally decided that she was going to try it. She was going to do it. And she just wrote this about her experience. Let me read what she said. She said this. She said, "Seeing what I see in the juvenile court system can be so overwhelming. There's so many problems in the city, and it makes you just want to give up. But what I do when I meet with Troy," that's the little boy that she mentors, "what I do when I meet with Troy for 45 minutes every week reminds me that I don't have to solve it. I just have to show up and give," there's that word, "give Troy my undivided attention." Even the St. Louis firefighters, 10 of them now, are mentoring through our program. But But you think about all that, the difference it's made in the lives of kids and reading and sitting, education and what that's going to do. But where did it all start? It all started one Easter when we wanted to respond to Christ giving his life to us, and we asked you to give. And many of you made an individual decision to give a gift at Easter, and that began this ministry. All that impact through our literacy project started with acts of giving. You know, in less than a month, we're going to have a team of people from the gathering travel over to Mozambique. They're going to go to Malema. And Malema is a village where we dug a well about a year ago. But we also saw an opportunity. There were tons of kids living there. And now that kids didn't have to walk to get water, they had to think about their education. And they said that their dream and their prayer was to have a school there. And so you know what? Back in October, we did an offering, and a school was built. And that school is now done. That team's going to go dedicate the school. And it is so cool already to see hundreds of kids whose lives are going to be different because now they have a school in their village. I mean, I cannot overestimate how important that is, what an impact that makes. But where did it start? Well, it started with an offering one weekend back in October where I just asked you to give a special offering, and $96,000 was raised. It started because you made a decision to follow Christ and to give. It started with an act of giving. I mean, those are just big ways that our church has made a greater impact in the past year, but there's also all these personal stories, all these individual ways. Remember 2 weeks ago when we started the sermon, we held up those signs that said, because of this church, what has happened in your life? And you all wrote down amazing things. In fact, I have a stack this tall in my office of things that you wrote, and I flipped through those. I've been seeing them on Facebook. And behind every one of those is a story of an impact that our church has been able to make on the life of a person. I wish we could tell every one of those stories. But here, just check out one of them.
I'm Laura Checkett. I have been going to the gathering for about 4 years, and I go to the 1045 McCausland site service. I've always been connected to God, and that was really fostered by my family, by my faith, and I grew up kind of exploring that and really feeling valued. But my friend sent me The Birds, the Bees, and the Bible, and I watched it, and in there Matt was speaking to the fact that we are known by God, we are loved by God, just as we are. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to have, trials and tribulations, we're going to have to make choices. But he encompassed everyone, including me as a gay woman. And I couldn't believe that. I was able to then move and come into the church and actually sit down and see a real sermon. And it was life-changing. So a year ago, I said yes to start a ministry that would speak to the LGBTQ community and be a place of support, a place of, advocacy and acceptance within the gathering. Because the person who asked me to join him in this ministry had helped me come out as a Christian 10 years prior. That person who had helped me so much when I was coming to terms with who I am in my faith ended up being my partner in an LGBTQ ministry here at the gathering called Emerge. Because of this church, we have a place where LGBTQ allies and members can go to support and encourage each other. We have a place where you can tell your gay cousin or transgender friend, hey, I know you're struggling with faith, or I know you don't know where to turn. Why don't you try the gathering? check out Emerge. We have that here now.
I think about the impact that was made in Laura's own life, and now the ministry that she gives herself to, Emerge, which is making an impact in the lives of LGBTQ people right here in our own city. But do you know where ministries like that start? Whether it's Emerge or kids ministry or student ministry or core groups or care ministry that makes a difference in your lives, it starts because of acts of giving. Your giving is what fuels these ministries that end up impacting the lives of other people. And I could go on, but what I'm getting at is this, that giving is all over the story of Jesus, but it's also all over the story of the gathering. Where you see Jesus changing lives is because he gave himself, and where you see the church making a difference, it all starts with giving. And here's the thing that excites me. The gathering is 11 years old. We are 11 years old as a church. And a lot of cool things have happened in 11 years. But I think back to when it started, and the gathering started when a group of people felt called by God to give themselves for something new. They left comfortable churches or secure things. They gave their money and their time and their energy, and they started something. And everything that we see here started with an act of giving. But as cool as the past decade has been, it's my firm belief, the whole idea behind the series is the next decade's going to be even better. That I truly believe that greater things are in store for you as a person, they're in store for us as a church. And we think that God is going to use our church to make an even greater impact in the decade ahead. I think that we're going to make a huge impact on lives, on marriages, on kids, on parents, on students. But we're going to make an impact through you on bigger things like health and education and poverty and racism. And we want God to use us to make an impact. But if we want to live into that, where does it have to start? It has to start right here. It has to start with us. And it starts with giving, with generosity. And that's why a year ago, I asked all of you to make a commitment to begin giving regularly, financially, here at the gathering. And back then I said that this is more than about funding a building or turning on a light bulb or something like that, but that giving is at the heart of what it means to follow Jesus. And as we do it, we're going to watch God make an even greater impact. We've been able to see that. But a year ago, I asked you to commit to the practice of giving. And we set out with a goal a year ago. Our goal was to raise $8 million over a 2-year period. That was our goal. And by the way, that is an incredible goal for a church our size, a church like ours. And here's the amazing thing, that series a year ago, nearly $7.7 million was committed. And it's already making a tremendous impact. But here we are halfway through it. We're a year into it. And I think we can still make that $8 million over 2 years. I think we can do it. But if we're going to do it, it requires each of us, every one of us, it requires every one of us to take a step, to decide to respond to Jesus' call to live as he lived. It requires each one of us deciding to make the move to give. And so that's what I hope you'll do today. That's how I hope you'll respond to the exciting things that God is doing here at the gathering. So last week when you came, you received one of these cards. I have one right up here. And on your way in, you should have gotten one, or it would have been on your chair. And I want you to open that up, because at the back of that is this card. And I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. But here's what I would like to ask you to do. For those of you who were not here last year, you never had a chance to maybe commit to this. Or maybe you were here, but you just weren't in a position back then to actually make a commitment. And what I hope you'll do today is I hope you'll fill out that card. And you'll see up at the top, it says, "This is my first commitment to greater things." And even though a year of it's already gone by, there's still a year of it to go. And I hope that you'll write down a commitment to give financially regularly, maybe each week or each month. But you can just write down the total that you want to commit over the next year. That's like regular giving, that's Christmas Eve offering, anything that you intend to give. So I hope that you'll take some time and you'll fill that out. I'll tell you what to do with it in just a second. Now, I know a lot of you were here a year ago. So you already made this commitment and you're 1 year in. But here's what I want you to do. There's a place on this card also to put your name and email. And then just to check, I've already committed to greater things. But the reason I want you to check that is I know how often giving can become something that's just sort of rote. Like we do it, some of us do it, it comes out of our bank automatically. But we don't take time to really ever think about it or to think about why we do it or to remember the cool things that are happening with it. This even happens to me. And so what I'd love for you to do is just take time, just mark that, and mark it as a way of remembering the commitment that you've made. Check in on how you're doing with that commitment. Some of you have had a life change since a year ago. And maybe now you can give an additional gift or you can give a special gift that you weren't in a position to do a year ago. You can always increase it. But I want you to write it down or to mark that as a way of just reminding yourselves of the way that you're already making a difference, of why you give, of the impact that you're making. And as you fill those cards out, here's what I'd like to do. I want to invite the band to come up, and they're going to begin playing. You're going to have time to fill out that card. But then as you're ready, I hope that you'll bring it forward. And as you bring it forward, there's a basket up front that you can drop it in. And then I hope that you'll kneel down and just spend some time in prayer. And that's how we're going to end the message today. When you drop that off, if you never received one, there's one of these little greater things stones that I invite you to pick up, just a reminder of the commitment that you've made. But as you come forward to pray, there's all sorts of things that maybe you could be praying about. If this is the first time you've ever given, maybe just pray that God would help you overcome some of the fears that can often be associated with beginning to give what we have away. I mean, that can be a scary thing. You know, some of you have already given, and just pray a prayer of thanksgiving for the impact that's being made. Pray for kids that are being impacted through our literacy project, or pray for our brothers and sisters in Mozambique. Pray for our church, that as we reach out in all these new ways, that God would use us to do His will and not just our own. Maybe as you come forward, you just pray about giving in your own life, and maybe the things that are blocking it, the ways that you could be doing that better when it comes to all aspects of your life. But friends, here's the thing. I know that over the next year, the next decade, the gathering is going to do greater things because of God. We're going to have a greater reach. We're going to make more space for more people. We're going to have greater depth. We're going to be a community that grows in our relationship with Christ. And we are going to make a great impact on lives, on families, on neighborhoods, on our city, on the world. But it has to start with following Jesus. Central to Jesus' life was giving. The good news is He gave Himself for us. And the good news is now He calls us to now give so that we can make a difference in the lives of others. So as you fill out that card, I hope that you'll remember the commitment you've already made, or make a commitment for the first time. And as we close, I invite you to bring that card forward as together we pray that God would use our giving to bless others. Amen.